Victor, shall we start? Because we tend to have more listeners that download the podcast later on. We can start now, I guess.
Yep, sure, we can start. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming today. We have a pretty strange and interesting theme, but it might frighten you a little bit in the middle of our talk today, or on the other hand, uh, give you some idea of how we can live in the world in the future, given the security we have right now and the security we can have when we couple biometrics and crypto. Uh, we talked before with you, Shannon, about various use cases that biometrics can bring. This is actually one of those, and it is even more connected to security of our daily lives than anything else that we discussed.
Well, yes, it's definitely something that we've talked about, and this is one of the biggest use cases when it comes to the use of biometrics, but it is also one of the most common. And I would say something that most people are familiar with. If anybody here has seen a Mission Impossible movie, we know how biometrics are used in offices and in high class places and labs. So, I mean, yes, the biometric controller is, I'd say, one of the uh, biggest or one of the most standard use cases that we see. Um, yeah, I mean, there are many. Let's say, what are the most common ones that we see? Fingerprints. Uh, Facial recognition, iris recognition are probably some of the most common ones that we see in the movies. But there's actually, a lot more to it, I'd say. And do you have any favorite biometrics?
Well, we rarely see them in our lives, frankly speaking, probably because of the fact that um, I personally don't usually live in the developed countries, right, but in developing ones. And yeah, I don't say I have favorite biometrics, Shannon. My answer to this is each use case has its pros and cons regarding the biometric modalities. And we will surely discuss this today. I wanted to start with just explaining to people what biometric controller is, right? And what is it connected to in the first place. So uh, I would describe that as one of the type of access control systems, right? And access control system is basically what you use every day. A key in your pocket, a password in your head uh, to open the door, or even a lock in the swimming pool, in the dressing room. Like, it's also access control system. And well, we've been living okay so far with what we have, but we all know how easy it is to uh, steal the key and copy it. It costs less than, okay, it costs around a few dollars to copy a key, right? And if you know where to put it, you can easily get control over the place. And you also have passwords, which have their own vulnerabilities. Uh, if anybody knows the password to the door of the office, well, it can be indefinitely distributed throughout the internet or just in the street shouting out to everybody what the password is.
There's a funny story here. I mean, this is, of course, before actual biometrics. And as password control started to come to some buildings, this is like almost 20 years ago. My father worked at one of the large national universities in Japan, and they wanted to go super high tech. So they're tired of students coming into the faculty rooms and trying to steal the answers to tests or find ways to get around the system. So they created a password protective door system for the entire university. And all the professors and assistant professors and the staff members had to go through, a very intensive crash course on how to utilize these electronics and how they were never, ever supposed to lose a password or to give access to anybody who should not have access, because it will cost a lot of money to change the password, and they didn't want to do that that often. So after it's like a 2-hour lecture on security and so forth, they didn't reveal the password on the spot. They called each and every faculty member into a private room to sit down and talk. And she gave them the password and said, "You're not allowed to write this down. You have to memorize it on the spot." Okay? So this is a password. First, you push the button 5, then you push the button 4, then 3, 2, and he concluded with 1 and push enter. And it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's a flipping password for a national university, and it was. And they stuck with that system and the same password for closely 10 years until they decided to put an IC chip on the badges for the faculty members, and didn't tell them the password.
Yeah. I like how this story took us to the next level of development of access control systems, right? Where you have the chips that we also use today with our door downstairs. And I mean, we had a little problem of copying it, but it was just a one-day problem. If you have one, you can make 10 copies of it, and bam, you're ready to go. And of course, to change it, you have to gather the whole building and give them the new keys, which again cost money. And well, sometimes people use tokens that look like a flashcard to enter the building. Password, passphrase, keys, well, they all work awfully, right? In these circumstances. And eventually, what the security specialists in these institutions come to is that, oh, we need to hire more guards, right? Which in US comes to $34,000 a year per each guard. Yeah.
Yeah, or they decide to do personalized ID cards or whatever. And what was that horrifying figure that you're talking about?
Yeah,
students losing their cards.
19% of US students lose their ID cards every year, which comes up to $80 million in cost to issue new ID cards. And we're not even taking administrative costs of people doing that into account.
That's scary. Now, so obviously, for some institutions that are afraid of, those costs, but more importantly, not those costs, but having those cards stolen or IDs stolen, they try to take the next step and try to go to biometric systems. And it's understandable. I've worked I worked with a lab that was fully controlled using biometrics. Although it was fingerprint and iris, fingerprint for the entry level and iris for the more heavy duty top secret labs. But the whole thing about that, it was great for the people who work there because they don't necessarily lose their biometrics that easily. Fingerprints can be scanned and copied and whatever, but yeah, um, depending on the security level, there are different tricks to it. But the whole thing about it is those systems were very centralized, and it's basically the company that holds all the biometric data. And there have been cases where their systems have been hacked and the biometric data was stolen, and that isn't necessarily ideal either. But you can obviously tell that a lot of countries are trying to, or not only countries, but companies are trying to move towards using these biometric controls. Like even my bank in Japan, um, basically to use some of the functions, I have to use a biometric controller. It's a little thing where you stick your finger into it and reads your finger veins, and it gives you access to your account. So it's not just your credit card or your bank card and your password, but you also have to.
Is it right in the ATM?
Yeah, it's right in the ATM.
Never seen that before.
Yeah, so these things are probably going to be more common in the future. But my question here is: would you like to have 15 different systems independently controlling and carrying your personal biometric data or not? It's like, I don't know. What about you? Hey, Dato, I see you there. Dato, do you have any comments here?
Well, I think it's an obvious question, Shannon, that, well, if you're talking about different biometric systems having different vectors, my biometric vectors at their disposal and only one system, actually, if you think about it, it creates like a single point of failure problem, don't you think? I mean, if only one system kind of holds all information about you.
That's true, especially if the system is centralized. But what really can be done here? I mean, there are two issues here. Of course, there's the single point of failure. I said if this system fails, everything associated to it can be mucked up, to be polite. But then again, if you have 15, 20 different systems that are there, I don't know if I want to spread my biometrics around to how shall I say, small scale authorities that can get your biometrics stolen.
On the other hand, you're making 15 points of failure instead of one.
Yes, exactly. More points of failure. But anyway, we understand that it's impossible to have one system for everybody. There will always be competition, right? And at least we could finally have some standards on securing the data. And when we're talking about all these access points, which are really crucial for businesses, and actually even data centers where this data is stored are secured by the same, type of access control systems. I don't understand why people don't yet have all the biometrics stored at least in the secure enclaves like we have in our version 1 of the mainnet. Yes, it's a bit harder to implement. Yes, it allows, it means that more computations have to be done and more resources wasted. But the thing that I usually hear from the companies why they don't do that is that, hey, these secure enclaves got hacked twice last year. People are not even thinking how many times servers without enclaves were hacked last year. 100,000 times? Maybe. But not under 10, like Intel enclaves.
And the whole thing comes down to, so the question, are biometric controllers necessary or not? And I think we all agree that as long as the data is kept private and that nobody's able to steal it, we actually would most likely want to move to a system with biometric controllers because it's so much easier. I mean, I don't want to remember all my passwords. The older I get, and I am getting older, I tend to forget more passwords, which means I tend to consolidate passwords, which is a major point of failure. Hell, my father, who recently had a stroke, contacted me today and said, I somehow cannot remember the password for my main computer in the office, and I need to get the tax records out. Is there any high-level hacks that you can use to get into my system? And I'm like, no, I encrypted that drive. So, if you had biometric controllers, if you just do it with, your face or whatever, it would be a lot easier for many people. And, for offices too. I mean, Victor and I were joking earlier about what kind of controls and permissions can be given. I mean, currently, the offices with biometric controls have, certain things. This biometric ID touches the door, he has access to this room or not, or he can go into this lab or not. But eventually, it could be more detailed, as in, if you touch a coffee pot, the coffee, maker will recognize this person is authorized to make coffee or not. And, if the person makes a bad coffee, the office could definitely, disallow those biometrics to touch the coffee pot. I think everybody would enjoy that. But what kind of biometric IDs or use cases would you envision, let's say at home or at the office, or what would you like to see, or what do you think is reasonable? Victor, Dato, whichever.
At home, Shannon, I'm not sure I have anything to secure besides the door itself. Like, I don't really need the biometric security of my fridge, for example.
It's because
This
you
is too
don't have
far.
kids yet. That's why you can't think of stuff.
That's true. Once you have kids, oh man, security levels on your fridge is
It's
top
about
priority.
biometric controllers on everything. Cupboards, doors, sink,
Cookie jars.
yes. And actually adding like security, like layers of security for children and against your pets and against the robbers, like different types of biometric security there. But more, I want to talk about this misconception, like the believers of the biometric future think that people are going to use, biometric controllers and biometric layers for everything in their house, which is, I think, is a big misconception here. And well, we should probably envision it as using it for like things that are really necessary because children in your life are important. Well, safeguard them from interaction with something dangerous, right? Or if you don't trust some of your siblings, well, you can also add things to like your car, for example, so that your teenage boy won't steal it and ride it or something like this. Depends on what you're safeguarding from.
I would say that this technology will mostly concentrate on protecting expensive equipment. For example, if there is an authorized person who can void the warranty of the machine, he will create enormous cost to the company. Or if the data center is not guarded properly well, data can be stolen and companies will receive a lot of fines for not protecting the data of users properly.
I'd definitely say, the use, I mean, other than your personal equipment, such as your computer or certain passwords or your crypto wallets or your bank accounts, basically, some of those essential things that cause, you know, in a broader term, damage to you, um, will probably be more tied to your biometrics. Obviously, we just step forward if we say, okay, what other things, contracts would be one thing. Land deeds might be tied to your biometrics, um, but the workplace would and workplace security of data probably will be the number one priority. Although I guarantee you that the various electronic utility makers will uh, do a run for it, basically allowing uh, certain controls to certain people. So I wouldn't be surprised if you will find biometric keys and locks on your refrigerator.
Yeah, and actually, I looked at some statistics, and this biometric controller market is growing at the same pace, and in some years at even larger pace than the whole biometric market. Because I don't see any, uh, I don't see anything bad besides the management efforts to replace the legacy systems. You not only enhance the security, but you also have zero replacement costs. Okay, you don't have to issue any new cards or keys. At the same time, you need to have fewer security staff if we're talking about some important institutional objects. So we will see this market growing and growing. We already can see that it is more developed in the developed countries, of course, but we'll see coming into developing countries as well pretty soon.
I just remember when the internet first started to hit uh, the major market. First, when you had the internet, it was the academics and limited uh, number of people. And suddenly, everybody and their dog had the internet, and believe it or not, they had companies advertising microwaves that had the internet access and refrigerators with the internet access, and said, "Oh yes, it will actually automatically give you the proper recipe and controls over the internet." And they had them in the market for about 2 years, and they realized that you really didn't need to have internet access on your microwave, because all you need to do is print out the recipe or scribble it down from somewhere. But there for a while there will be some crazy things out there. But I do agree that the biometric market, the biometric controller market, will be growing. So, but really, it comes down. Personally, I believe is the security of the data. How useful it will be, and what use cases it will be the most useful for, um, are things that only history will determine after trial and error, but you will see a big push towards it. And I think the key here really is the security of the biometrics, because unlike uh, the regular ID card that costs you $10 to actually get a new card, your replacement card, it's kind of hard to replace your biometrics. It's like, okay, sorry, your face failed, therefore we have to get you a new face before you can get a new identity. That I don't think is a cheap solution. So, the core of this really comes down to is how you manage or how you secure the biometric data from malicious actors or people who want to profit. Let's see, Victor, let's talk just a little bit about modalities here. What kind of modalities would you be looking at, or what would be ideal for the various use cases we've been talking about?
Well, when we're talking about the biometric access control systems, I think I would pick palm vein as the winner. Why? Because it's internal to the body. We remember from the films of the beginning of the century how people just cut off the slice of a finger and used that, to enter the building. So fingerprints are not really the best type here. And at the same time, still living in the COVID world a bit, fingerprints are less sanitary than other methods. Fingerprints can also change over time, and well, yeah, fingerprints can be easily reproduced. While we're talking about palm veins, uh, they not are only private by design because you can't have a photo of a person's palm vein. It's really hard to reproduce for a perpetrator, and it has liveness inherent in design because the palm vein scanners can also feel the temperature. The only con of using the palm vein is that if you're in Siberia and you have to access the door into the building from outside, well, in cold weather, the accuracy is reduced and liveness may not work that well. But if we're talking about those controllers that are inside the building, palm vein is a certain winner.
Oh, I mean, palm vein, yes. I mean, obviously, it's a fairly large mass. I mean, compared to, let's say, child's hand, my hand is more like a bear's hand. It might be tougher. I mean, what about if we're talking finger veins, which are just as hidden? It's a smaller mass, but what would be the difference compared to, let's say, a finger vein controller and a palm vein controller?
The only difference here, Shan, is the amount of data. So from palm veins, you can take like a lot of points and have more accurate and unique image of palm vein per person. That's the major difference here.
But wouldn't you, let's say, imagine being able to carry around, let's say, a finger vein scanner, which is a smaller mass compared to palm vein scanner? Let's try to put it on your mobile phone, because everybody would want. I don't think they'd want to be carrying around extra major devices that are bigger than your iPhone. So, I mean, I guess for bigger buildings, yes, but I guess the answer really comes down to multiple modalities,
Mm.
depending on the use case. So,
Well, actually, if you want it to be portable, I would go for facial iris recognition instead of fingerprint. The well, the problem with the facial recognition, it's not even a problem for access control system actually, because you can read the person's face from long distance, and for example, already give him way in, understand that yeah, that's the same person coming when he's still coming to the place that he should enter. So it's very convenient, but right now facial recognition is subject to spoofs, right? It's subject to, well, not everybody uses the most advanced facial recognition systems, and almost nobody can achieve the uh, security of facial data.
Data, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's also very interesting to talk about the technological limitations of biometric controls, right? Well, the biometric data can be really different in size and quality, right? It's pretty customizable in this regard, and uh, all the biometric controls can be set to interact with the external databases, internal ones, and there's always the problem of bandwidth. Like if you have many people interacting with the same, well, not in the biometric controller infrastructure. Um, well, it will really take time to create biometric controllers with enough bandwidth to even operate in like uh, business center environments, because the amount of people coming and going out daily and the amount of interactions happening simultaneously. So it's still a growing field, and there's a lot more ways to go.
I agree. When we're talking bandwidth, I mean, coming from a company that specialized in data, especially wireless data for the longest time, um, yeah, one thing that we tend to forget is bandwidth and the amount of data that is flying around there. So I do agree that there are many angles that this needs to be considered from, and that there are, you know, a ton of issues here. But well, let's see, we are about almost 40 minutes into the show now. If anybody has any questions or thoughts concerning biometric controllers, it could be anything from questions to um, actual use cases, or what you look forward to or what you fear. Um, Please raise your hand and go ahead. And if nobody raises their hand, you can always uh, point at somebody, but that usually scares people, so I'll save that for later. So it looks like we have a shy crowd again. Let's see. Who do we want to invite? Subi, are you interested in commenting or asking a question?
Hey guys, I have some troubles with the microphone, but I will try to make some specific question, if you don't mind. What is the main argument can there be for those people who don't understand the difference between Face ID and humanoid technology? It's not even for me; it's for my friends who are also listening us right now. So can you explain, please, to them?
No, yeah, sure. It's pretty simple. What Face ID does is that it stores your biometric image inside of your device, meaning that if you lose your device, you lose access to everything you had, uh, which you hide it behind the biometrics. Because what Face ID has is it compares your face to the face that you enrolled when you first launched your iPhone, for example. And that's pretty much it. The biometrics of Apple are not supposed to tell the difference between 2, 10, or 100 different people. So they can't tell if you are unique because they don't execute comparison between all the people who enrolled into Apple, right? And at the same time, well, they don't really need. I think they have anti-spoofing techniques, right? I'm sure they do. Um, the question is, are they better than the anti-spoofing we have right now, or not? Because I haven't seen any report of the accuracy of liveness detection of Apple biometrics. But again, the main difference is that when you use your phone, it just stores your image of the only user who uses the phone. And that's pretty much it. And it compares it one to one. While in Humanode, we we store the data encrypted among the distributed network of biometric servers. And we are able to tell if you are the same person trying to enter the account or not. Uh, like, and it doesn't depend on whether you're using the same device or not. I hope it was clear.
And also, you might want to mention that we're not necessarily, storing the face, and liveness detection is a whole different feature here.
Okay, thank you, guys. That was clear. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Dato, do you have anything to add to our answers there?
No, it was pretty much well, straightforward. So Face ID is local, and what we're trying to do is decentralized, and well, a lot of clients and servers and various layers involved here. So
Yep, you lose your phone, but you don't lose your access.
Which is pretty good because, well, I've never yet haven't lost my phone, but I do have friends who lose their phone every couple of months. They forget them at bars and whatever. So, yeah, it's a common friend here that both Dato and Victor knows. So, anyway, leaving that aside, do we have any other questions? Any other comments? If not, and Dato, is there anything else that we want to talk about concerning biometric controllers, or do we want to move forward with with a little bit of news?
well, to my knowledge, you haven't spoken about the decentralization of biometric controls, or have you?
That's true. We haven't gone into it in detail, and actually, this is one thing that I was waiting for you for. So, the mic is yours.
Well, actually, I was going to talk about a situation in the future, right? Imagine there is like well, imagine there's decentralization of biometrics, and there's like decentralized biometrics that work and exist, and like a company wants to establish biometric controllers, physical, digital ones on several layers. Now, my question is, how do you envision this company actually doing it without kind of losing its authority on what it's supposed to control? Or in other case, would a company even use decentralized biometric controllers in the first place?
Well, I definitely say that um, they would most likely uh, do a well, what they would call a semi-decentralized solution is that they'd have exact backups on many different or a number of data centers that they control. But if we're talking about the true meaning of decentralization, no, it will be very centralized, and the control over it will be very centralized.
Yes, and I think that as well. So, in my understanding, decentralization of biometric controllers is like layers of biometric security for various things, and access can be um, directly implemented in a democratic society for public goods.
Yeah, and you know, um, of course, I know this is your vision too. It's also my vision, probably the vision of everybody in the Humanode team, is that um, when we're talking about uh, a database, especially uh, for biometrics, for the technology uh, surrounding the biometrics, we do not necessarily believe that it is the absolute uh, it's absolutely good to have a single centralized authority control uh, everything with total centralization of control. Um, and I guess unless we had a a unified world government where the Earth is one country and there's only one central authority, um, we we would not trust. I mean, I'm American. I would not trust the U.S. government on this, and I would rather have decentralized authority. So everybody participating in the system to have uh, equal rights and shares and voice in this. So I think this is part of the whole concept of Humanode, saying because the biometric identity here, these are basic, you know, human rights. You want to have basically everybody to have a say. I want to have a say if we're talking about my human rights concerning my biometric identity. So I personally feel more comfortable in a truly decentralized system where not only uh, the the system, the hardware, the network itself is decentralized, but the authority over it is decentralized in a much um, broader system. Yes, it might take more time to come to some decisions, but I believe it would um, actually uh, be more protective because it is everybody's concern. So, Dato.
Yeah, I totally agree with your position on the authorization of biometric controllers. Yeah, was there to say.
So obviously to do a little I wouldn't necessarily say PR here, but what we're trying to do here at Humanode is this is a proof of concept, working model that hopefully will grow to the point that everybody that participates not only shares in the governance and the authority here, but also in the ownership and, I guess, more importantly, the responsibility of trying to protect this data and privacy. So with that in mind, we are taking some steps forward here. So let me briefly do a couple announcements, shall we say.